are here in Mürren, and we would like to make a podcast which called People on Peace.
People on Peace. Good.
People on Peace, that's the headline. So I would ask, what is peace for you?
Well, I'd rather do a review of the way in which the word peace has been used, if you don't mind, and then come to that, a little bit later. For instance, in the literature, peace in Shakespeare, for instance, if one character says peace, peace, it means be quiet. So in the plays, particularly the comedies, that word appears in the sense of be quiet.
Yeah.
It's not a use that's current anymore, but it was current in Shakespeare's day, so that's another use. And of course there's the famous novel by Tolstoy, War and Peace, where it's obviously a counterbalance to war.
Yeah.
So if the state of non-war is peace.
Right.
That's another definition of it. And of course, when you study something like conflict studies, which is something you can study in a university, peace studies rather, actually.
Peace studies,
Yes,
yeah.
peace studies, it shows or gives some information about how conflicts have been resolved, say between nations, between two nations who are at war, how conflicts have been solved. So there's a whole baggage of uses of the word peace, actually, which is in itself quite interesting. And of course, as we're here at Mürren for a gathering under the banner of Krishnamurti, we should look at what he says and means by peace,
Yeah.
because it's not the same. In fact, he often talks about peace is not the peace between two wars, or it's not just quietness, or it's not just silence, or it seems to have a deeper dimension to it. So I have just picked up and worked with these various definitions and used them as they've come along. I think for Krishnamurti they have a much deeper resonance and significance than they do, say, for instance, peace, be quiet, or war and peace. There's something that's not in the realm of duality. It's something that's quite absolute, I think, in his use of it. If you ask me what my use of it would be, I would say, well, I don't know that completely deep, silent, sense of peace, where something is nothing is disturbed, nothing is agitated, nothing is required. It's a complete state of harmony, it seems, but it's not. That's what I've gathered from reading his work. It's not a relative state, it's an absolute state.
Yeah.
And that's the sense that he often gives to words. But so there are these various...
Yes. Often he would talk about the end of all conflict.
Quite, yeah.
What is the causes, according to Krishnamurti or ourselves, the causes of conflict? So now we are into this, we understand right now peace as no war.
Yes, that's the ordinary sense, the absence of war. But
yeah.
It's also obvious from the way he uses it that he means much more than the state of no war.
Yeah.
Or he means it in a deeply interior sense, a deeply individual or personal sense that the mind is undisturbed.
Yeah.
And he even talks, well, for instance, one one phase of history he sometimes refers to as the Egyptian civilization, and that it existed for 3,000 years undisturbed. So he gives it that kind of meaning. That would be a kind of peace, and I think probably also, as we saw this morning, or very shortly before this, is the Brahminical culture of India, which lasted for about 2,000 or 3,000 years, and which he claims has now disappeared in recent times, in his lifetime.
Yeah.
So there was something about that, both in the structure and the intention and probably in the operation of it, that had something to do with peace in that deeper sense of something that unfolds out of itself, comes out of itself, but is at the same time the necessary ground for a creative unfoldment.
Yes, but do we know historically that what you mentioned, there was no war at that time in this area, or maybe? I mean, there must have been conflict between man and wife. Or
yes, there must have been. Yes, in that sense, I don't think any civilization has stopped that. No, certainly at that personal level there was conflict, so in that sense you could say there was no peace, but in a sociological sense, in a broader sense, it was, I think, quite peaceful, and the rules were laid down and everybody seemingly understood them and followed them, but within that there was a lot of caste division, class division, that also. So it's not quite as perfect as...
No, but it was, for some reason, accepted.
Yes, well, I think that's a good point, that it was accepted because it seemed to be for the greater good.
Yeah.
So you would, people who were not particularly benefiting by it, they would say, oh well, it's for the good of society as a whole, and it's certainly better than war. So they went along with it, and I think in his sense also it implies a certain intelligence, that you wouldn't immediately pick up a sword or pick up a gun or pick up a weapon of any kind if there were a dispute. In other words, there's another way of handling this. There's an intelligent way of handling this that's not resorting to violence. Because, yes, it's difficult to imagine a situation where there was no conflict at all.
Yes, maybe if we could say something about, I think for many peace, just it would be a concept, an idea.
Yes.
And some people, in when I was a youngster, it was in the late 60s and early 70s.
Right.
Peace was very, it was, what do we call it, modern.
Yes, give peace a chance.
Give
that's
peace
a John
a chance.
Lennon song.
Absolutely.
Yeah, give peace a chance. So that's it's a popular.
Yeah, and imagine and all that.
Yes, imagine there's no countries. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is very much in the spirit of a certain popular movement of that time, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. But it tends to be, I mean, in a way it's an idea. It's a kind of a fantasy, or I want that.
Yes.
I think it should be like that.
It's desirable.
It's desirable. Yeah. And some people will disagree with a point of view like that. Some people will talk about that, conflict is make us grow,
yes,
or something like
yes,
that. Yes,
there are people around like that, and they will say quite publicly, there's no end to conflict.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at the way Krishnamurti looks at conflict, you cannot accept that.
No, you wouldn't accept that.
You wouldn't accept that conflict is inevitable.
No. No, on the contrary. Yeah.
So I think in that case, it's a question of looking at conflict at the root of the problem, which Kay maintains, and we study, that the conflict is within. So even without external conflict, there's internal conflict.
Yes, and one of the points he always makes, Krishnamurti, is that, the way we live, the way society is organized, will always end ultimately in war. In war or in conflict.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, the way we live, yes. Well, he does say at one point for the first and last freedom, war is the spectacular and bloody expression of our everyday life, projection of our everyday life.
Yes.
So he's quite adamant about that.
Yeah.
That it is actually something that's going on all the time.
Yes.
And we only notice it when it breaks out in a war or an open conflict, or usually in killing.
Yes. And I think it would be quite interesting to dig a little bit into this area, because for many people in the West, or in Scandinavia, war is something very far away.
Mm-hmm.
I have lived for quite many years, and I have colleagues or people around me who for a couple of years ago said, war and all that is old-fashioned.
War is old-fashioned. Yeah.
War is old-fashioned.
Yeah.
And they were kind of, for them, they couldn't imagine, that Denmark should be in a war.
It might be fortunate enough to be. Yeah, it's true, the Scandinavian countries do stand out as being a model of peaceful and at least smooth and harmonious living at the social level. I think that there's quite a lot of internal conflict, however, and neurosis and mental health difficulties, from what I understand, from what I read. So it's not quite as wonderful as that, but it's relatively speaking, I think this is the distinction, it's relatively peaceful. Yeah. And it's relatively harmonious, and it's relatively efficient and fair, and it's often looked up to. I know in our country, the UK, Scandinavia is often looked to as a model of something that runs better, is cleaner, healthier, more sensible, more intelligent, and less of a hodgepodge than what we've got. So I think in that relative sense, perhaps, if there hasn't been a war for 50 or 100 years, that's fairly peaceful. But that is using the word peace in the sense of absence of war. Yeah. It's not in the sense, it's not in the deeper sense that Krishnamurti alludes to, which is that of being deeply harmonized within oneself.
I was thinking, not if we could say about, he's talking about that the way we live, the way we think and feel and act, contribute to war, to conflict.
Yes,
it's not peace.
No, well, we're gradually, I suppose, but it depends, I think, how deeply you look into yourself, because if you look unblinkingly, frankly, you know that you have disturbances in your psyche and fears and negative emotions, anxieties. So these things are present in the psyche, and they seem to be present as much in New York City as they would be in some African or Indian village, where it was probably much simpler, but there would still be conflict going on. I think, I think he would go so far as to say, so long as thought is running the show, thought is the most important factor in our lives, then there's bound to be conflict.
Yeah. So he's talking about, or maybe, would you say you are more interested in, we are not talking about managing emotions, for instance.
No.
You know, strong emotion can lead to kind of physical violence, but that, you know, in a society like the Danish, you know, violence is not really accepted among ordinary people. You know, you are not allowed to hit in the school.
To hit in the school?
You are not allowed to hit a schoolboy or schoolgirl.
No, that's coming
you
to
know,
the UK
and
too.
also in the family, you are not allowed to hit your, you know, that is, but that I would call that we handle it, or we deal with it in a you know, we regulate and tell each other, this is not good, you have to control and consider and all that.
Yeah, that has a long evolution, I think. I mean, the idea that you bring up children with a stick or with a slap on the... That's not so far back, actually. It's only about a generation ago that it was fully condoned, actually. So these are developments which we feel are improvements, just as we think the castigation of racism and the elimination of racism are laudable goals. They are good things in themselves, because there's been some evolution of the thinking about the whole thing, and that coloured people, for instance, are not inferior because they're coloured, or they're deserving of less respect. So these are also elements of violence, actually. So there just seemed to have been some tackling of that issue and some improvement, but it is an improvement. In other words, it's relative.
Yeah.
What Krishnamurti is talking about and constantly talking about is something absolute.
Yeah.
So it's a much more difficult thing to grasp.
Most of the time, Krishnamurti is talking about the causes of conflict, and he always point out nationality, religious division, and political division, of course, economic and social division, and in the end he is saying that all division creates conflict.
All division creates conflict, yes.
Yeah. What is your, how do you receive that?
It's certainly logical, because the thing that links religious division or social division or class division is that they're part of the operation of thought. So there's a more universal current behind these different manifestations, which is the operation of thought, because thought in itself divides. Me and you, it and they, you know, sort of it divides. So therefore, in that sense, it's bound to bring about conflict.
Yeah.
But in itself, in its own operation. Not what it's about, but what it is in itself, because It exists by operating on something. So therefore that's part of the division, that thought is operating on something and trying to amend it or improve it or change it in some way.
Yeah. I was just thinking a tricky thing is that if we take religion, it's many people will feel that the Bible or any scripture, that is not only thought; it's coming from
a higher source.
A higher source.
Yes.
So it's not human thoughts; it's something we have to obey because it is from a higher.
Yes, it's from a higher authority. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that also has a huge background to it. The people have believed in God or gods since forever.
Yeah.
Whether it's a plurality of gods as in Hinduism or it's one God as in Christianity, Judaism and Islam, they all believe in one God. There's always some divine presence or power that you need either to affiliate yourself with so that you don't displease them, or you have to live by their dictates. They've set up the world in a certain way, and you have to behave in a coherent kind of way, a way that's harmonious with what these dictates are, like the Ten Commandments or the teachings of Jesus. And later, although the teachings of Jesus are rather less formulaic from my point of view, it's actually more the churches that have built up the structure of reward and punishment and heaven and hell and these things.
Yeah.
These things which you're called upon to believe in if you are a believer. So there's a whole history involved in them, really. And that history is really what you're subscribing to when you subscribe to the religion. So it's, in a sense, it's not to do with religion at all in Krishnamurti's sense. It's to do with the perpetuation of an institution.
Yeah.
And that's where it loses it. That's where it ceases to be religious in his definition. It's not religious. It's just the perpetuation of an institution or even a power structure that those in charge of it feel is necessary for the continuation of society or the betterment of society.
I'm just thinking, we also sometimes listen to Krishnamurti talking about disorder.
Disorder.
Yes. And I don't know if he ever have said that conflict is total disorder, but I could imagine he could have said something like that.
Yeah.
But right now I was thinking that something which I find quite striking, it is that he says that conformity is disorder.
Yes,
and regarding our conversation when you talk about the Egyptians, conformity, in a way, when you conform, there is no conflict. It's, in a way, there is some kind of peace.
Yes, the peace in the sense of absence of war, because you've laid your weapons aside, or you're not openly fighting
in that sense again. Yeah.
It's a very relative kind of peace.
Yeah.
And it's more like submission, really. It's more like saying, well, I don't like this, but it's better than the alternative, which is.
That's how every selection in the Western world is like that today.
Yeah, it's like that, and also countries which are, in effect, just one large concentration camp, like North Korea. You actually don't have any alternative, but to do what the leaders are saying.
Yeah.
But that's probably an extreme example, but it's not. It contains the same imperative that you have to obey, and you have to do as you're told, and there's no leeway or individual freedom at a relative level. So we are.
Yeah, but I think it's, for me, it also maybe points to another vision.
Yeah.
You know, that if to conform is disorder, then there must be an order, which is for each one to find or something. I mean,
yes.
You cannot, order is not following.
It's not following.
Right.
Not following what?
Yeah, it can be, the morality of society, or, it can be following a system of thinking, or following a guru or a religion, or,
You're saying that implied in that is conformity, and therefore suppression and a kind of violence, in fact.
Yeah.
Which operates in oneself. Yes, I think so. That's how these regimes work, and on fear, of course, because they have all the power. They can come and pick you up and put you in prison. Apparently in North Korea, I believe it's true. I can't verify it for myself, but there are people who've never left a concentration camp. They were born there and they live there and they die there. Oh. So it's pretty horrendous, actually. And the freedoms that people have fought for are quite relative, actually. I mean, as we see now in the in elections in Western Europe, democracy is under attack, and in America too. It's under attack because of the ability to manipulate modern means and the internet and various things you can put out there, which are patently false, but people see them and believe them.
Yeah.
So that we're in a dire position at the moment. At one time you could say it looks as though we're moving into a new phase of history and sociology, in the sense that we're getting more peaceful. But those days have gone. It's much less peaceful, I would say, for the last 20 years or so. It's getting less peaceful.
Yeah.
And more insistence on competition, more antagonism, more force given to nationalism as a doctrine, which is very divisive.
Yeah. I'll just go a little further with the notion that we can say that this nationality and all this kind of division is a source of war, but also to come closer to daily life. What about opinions? I mean, we live in a society where opinion to you, it's sometimes it is like you have to have opinions about everything.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's a good point. Opinions about everything, and also you have to define yourself before you speak. For instance, in certain conferences, I haven't been to one myself, but you're asked before you speak or say anything, including opinion. You have to say whether you're a white, male, middle-aged person, and you're identified in those ways by the colour of your skin, by your affiliation, by your political party. So, first of all, they establish the profile of the person, rather than just speaking as we're doing now. You establish the platform of the person, and they speak from that platform, but they already put you in a box.
Yes, but why is that important today? In a way,
I think it's because of the question of identity. because things are so slippery where identity is concerned, and well, sexual identity for one thing, and you know, man, woman, gendered, of course. It's assumed a huge importance because there is something there that's ambiguous also. It's not completely arbitrary. Because apparently as a very young child, just a few weeks old, there's certain brain developments which can give you a different sense of yourself from which than you would have if you just went by which sexual organs you're producing. So there are some grounds for it, but and maybe some liberating feeling about it. But in general, it tends to buttonhole you or categorize you or put you in a box before you've even really had chance to say who you are or what you feel you are.
Yeah.
And having opinions, of course, goes along with that. But I think it's a bit. The opinions themselves seem to derive from an identity. So if I identify myself as a, white male, university educated, all these things give a certain profile, and I live by them. And I think that is felt to be necessary rather than just a feature of who you are. It's become more central to who I am. I think this quest for identity is very strong in people. They don't feel they are anybody, or they're nobody, in fact, unless they have this strong sense of identity. Even with the football, you see, they identify with the nation, and people go crazy about it. And it's just a game, actually, but it acquires such a sort of tigerish importance, and it becomes so desperately serious that there are fights about it and even deaths.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe it has to do with what some people call globalization. It's just, I don't think most of my life I have lived, I was not concerned about, the whole environment was that, you were a boy or a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And and boys and girls get married, and it was not so much talk about it.
No,
it was just that was how life was.
Yes, of course.
So I'm still very many years behind the situation today.
Yeah.
in the way, I don't know how many kind of sexes there are,
No, well, we don't know anymore. But
we don't know anymore.
Yeah.
And in a way,
how serious it is. For some people, probably it's very serious. For others, it may.
Yeah.
I don't know. They may just be playing with it, really. But it's come to be important. And of course, it does offset some of the stigma that arises did arise when a boy, for instance, discovered he was homosexual, and like boys are the same. That was frowned upon, definitely, and even severely punished in previous centuries.
And still is in many places.
It's a problem for the church also, whether they will marry gay priests, whether they will allow them to marry, or whether they will marry gay people. And so,
but it is, in a way, it's a notion. Every civilization or society have a notion of what is order.
Yes.
Kind of what is order.
Yes.
And when this order is challenged, we have a conflict.
Yes,
or maybe
it
there
might
is
be
a moderation.
The superior order, like the French Revolution was supposed to bring in liberty, equality, fraternity. In other words, all men are equal, and we're still singing about it. And they deserve justice and liberty for all. This is in the Declaration of Independence in America, liberty and justice for all. So there's a certain sense that by moving forward and adopting those tenets, you are advancing society, because it was fairly authoritarian before that. In France, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so in general, by and large, although there's been some vacillation, I think they do feel that the gains are more important than the losses. But it's very relative.
Yeah.
But I think the fundamental thing is the question of identity, really.
Yeah. That leads me to think that I think you told a story the other day that I don't know if it was a policeman who asked you.
Yes, he said to me, "I'm a white male." He didn't say policeman actually. He said, "I'm a white male." Something. He may have mentioned the age. What are you? Obviously expecting that I would say, well, I'm white male and and a bit older than you are, but I didn't. I suddenly had a ping, this is actually quite important. I said, well, I'm a human being. He wrote it down. He didn't argue with it. He didn't ridicule it either, to his credit. But I said, I'm a human being.
Yeah.
And I think that's, that, simple as it seems, it's a very important starting point. Whether you're interested in Krishnamurti's teachings or not, it's a very important starting point, because it established something which actually scientifically also has been shown to be true, in that the DNA of all human beings is the same.
In that way, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was really quite a discovery, because one of the curses of humankind has been feeling you're superior because you are white, male, Nordic. This is
genetic reasons or something.
Yeah, genetic reasons. You're somehow inherently superior.
Yeah.
And apparently the Chinese did believe, until fairly recently, that they were superior. Which is not difficult to see, because they think, China's the empire of the middle or whatever, sort of superior creation, and they're superior people, but they're not. It's shown that the DNA was the same as that of other human beings, so everybody on the planet has the same DNA, so in that sense we are all equal at a very basic level.
Yeah.
And what such hierarchies as we create are maybe for social convenience or for the division of power, or but they're not basic.
No. It reminds me of, there's a Danish poet with psalms, Christian, and he said, first be human.
Yes.
And then Christian.
First be human, then question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And also, it seems to me that Krishnamurti, he's talking to and within just to be a human.
Yes.
He says very often, it's not a Hindu earth or a communist world, or it's our world.
Yes, it's our world.
It's our world.
Quite right.
And yeah, but again, for me, you know, it's kind of as poesy. I think, you know, I feel it's beautiful to recognize that, but often the feeling is different. You know, in day-to-day situation, you know, the feeling can arise. I'm not like her or him. You know?
Yes. And I'm glad I'm not.
Right.
Yeah. Other than
I stick to what I am.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I think it arises very easily in people, the sense that they're superior to others, and it takes some eradication. I mean, and it's not just along coloured lines either. I mean, the Irish were discriminated against generally for centuries. When they went to America also they were discriminated against.
Yeah.
They couldn't get, they couldn't get homes, they couldn't get lodgings, they couldn't get, and there's in the UK over this past year there's been quite some conversation about the so-called Windrush generation. These were people who were brought into Britain from the West Indies with the promise of work, of course.
Yeah.
But when they got here, very often they found a notice in windows, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish, that kind of thing. So they were really looked on at the same level as a dog.
Oh.
That's not so long ago, 50 years, well, it's more than 50 years, but I mean, it's within my lifetime. So there are things like that, this notion of some being superior to others.
Yeah. Sometimes I think personally that what we call the self or the ego or the me, in a way, in this story it tells itself has to be superior in some way to other people. In a way it's built in. If you have an identity, an ego, a self, it is in some strange way superior.
Yes.
Either it cannot live, That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Well, yes, I think that tendency is inbuilt in the sense of separation, because the sense of separation will give you the sense that you are not like somebody else, which will immediately be divisive, and then you're not the same as the other person, because actually you're a bit better than they are. And that arises quite quickly. And it's encouraged in education too. Competition,
yeah. I have at least two questions just to mention them.
Yes, of course.
And the one is, could we say, what is peace good for? And that's one. And where can we find peace? Because it seems that sometimes I hear Kay saying that, that peace in a way is fundamental to, and peace is also, we haven't mentioned, I think, the absence of fear.
Yeah, the absence of fear, yes, quite. Yeah, it's the absence of conflict, the absence of fear, the absence of neurosis. Yeah, I think this is where we get to what he might call the real work, because then you have to deal with those things that are in the way of peace. And another sage said also, in answer to this question of peace, the only way you can have peace, a peaceful world, is to have peaceful people. Which sounds It's very, very simple, but in fact, it's true. You cannot have a peaceful world with people who talk about peace or blame the war, whatever it is, on some other, group or nation or tribe, whatever. But the peace has to be within, and I think that's where Krishnamurti is important and quite right, that you cannot have peace outside if there's no peace within. You can have relative peace. I mean, you wouldn't go out and hit somebody, or you'd have a certain measure of respect for people and not be violent with them, but nevertheless this urge to harm or dominate or claim superiority, I think these things lie quite deeply anchored in the psyche, and they have to be exposed and then watched and discovered and observed and let go of.
Yeah. Do you think these qualities sometimes could we call them animalistic?
Animalistic. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it is in nature. The monkeys. They have to be one superior monkey who.
Yes,
any African.
they have a tribal leader, and many animals do have tribal leaders. Four-footed animals do too, like wolves and coyotes and wild dogs for that matter. So yes, I think it comes with that territory that they need to establish. As individuals, animals need to establish a territory, and as packs or groups or collections of animals, they have to be able to move and live, and that involves dominance. If for mating there's necessity for the strongest to win, so they fight to find out who has the right of intercourse with the females. So, it's all pretty basic actually.
But I mean, in a way, the suggestion is the question is, can we move out of these animalistic and very deep urges that we have?
Well, I think we can work at understanding them, and we have, I think, in a sense, we have formalized relationship, although it's much looser now than it was. So we have marriage, we have, even that's not saying the whole world over, but in Western societies, they're supposed to be monogamistic, one man, one woman. That seems to be a fairly common pattern, but it is a pattern that I think probably it's been introduced and followed because it is probably more harmonious than a free-for-all. And so it exists in most societies, and there's some longing in human beings to have somebody you can be with, whether it's dependence or more than dependence. That's a question. It's a question anyway. But at a relative level, again, I think there are measures that people have taken to regularize the strong urges to sexual urge and urge to dominance in particular, that would otherwise create a lot of havoc.
Yeah.
But you can remember for your own school days, I can remember from mine, even at the age of not even 11, just 6 or 7, there was somebody who was the leader, who was a bit bigger, a bit stronger, a bit, and he asserted himself. I mean, that arises very early, actually. the thing about dominance.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a certain pleasure in it.
There's a certain pleasure in it, yes, there is. Yeah, definitely.
And power and so on.
Yeah, power. Well, power's very attractive.
Yeah.
And of course it's pervasive also. It is a question of power in the animal kingdom, but it gets refined and psychological in the human world, but it's still power. And people are drawn to it.
Yeah.
And we haven't solved it, not really.
So I'm just thinking right now, that maybe we don't have discovered, or we don't know the energy of peace. Is there an energy of peace? We know the energy of conflict,
Yes.
Fight and win.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure we think of peace in terms of energy, at least I don't think I have. We think of it in the absence of violence. We think of it as an absence rather than a presence. But I think that it's interesting to go into this question of what peace is in a more positive sense, as a current of, even just friendship, bringing people together, holding them together, clusters of people like we have here for 2 weeks. It's a kind of running community. But it's necessary to generate that sense of brotherhood, I think. I mean, people have been talking about it for 200 years, at least. Robert Burns. So
about brotherhood.
About brotherhood, the brotherhood of man.
Right,
Right. World to world, the world o'er shall brothers be for all that. That's a famous poem in English.
Okay.
Yeah, by a famous poet. Man to man, the world o'er shall brothers be for all that. That's how it ends. So that's the sort of target, if you like. But the target gets missed all the time, I think, because of this question of power. I feel it's quite fundamental, really, that how we deal with it and how we solve it. And I think it has to be tackled at the personal level, but also.
But are we saying that maybe could there be a possibility that to reflect on a kind of positive what is this effect or something on this? Sorry. Maybe I just can close it. Okay.
No, I think
I'm still at the question: what is peace good for? If we could say some, because I think I have some friends. If I would talk about peace, for them, it seems to be boring,
Well, I think actually, paradoxically, that is one of the things that prevents us changing in a deep level. Is this question of, well, what would you get out of it, and how would it make things better? And of course, there was a whole school of thought around the First World War, at least, and I think the Second, as a continuation of the First, that it was a good thing, that it sort of cleansed it killed off a lot of people, and that wasn't necessarily such a bad thing. So there are people who certainly don't believe that peace is the answer, rather that a different kind of human being needs to emerge. You know, this idea has been around way before Krishnamurti. This is Nietzsche's idea, a new kind of human being, the Übermensch. And
Übermensch, yeah.
the Übermensch,
Yeah.
and the Übermensch would be a superior kind of human being, strong and self-reliant and but in some sense aware of himself, not just going around with a sword killing people. It's not that, but being evolving inwardly. So that idea has been around for quite a long time, actually, but of course it got misrepresented by Hitler and got mixed up with other things. So I'm not sure peace is entirely passive. I think it does necessarily have a kind of generative or creative component that means it's actually doing something. I think the people who critique it say that it's not doing anything and we'll all get bored to death.
Right.
You know, and particularly now there's so much AI around, you know, and so many things are being done for us. We were in the airport the other day in London, Heathrow, and there was literally a robot going around cleaning the floor.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
A robot, somewhat like a human?
Yeah, about so tall.
Okay.
Yeah, about so tall and self-directing. Yeah, and it was going around cleaning the floor. And I mean, that also, when robots do more and more things for us, that's another question. But I don't know. I mean, I think the sense that the human issue is still paramount and you can't get around it. You can't evade it. You can't find a substitute for it. I think that's still, for me, that rings true. So we have to tackle the human issue, which is what we're here to do, of course.
Yeah, I was just, I was about to say that something like that maybe peace and creativity go together.
Right.
And but if you look at famous writers or public, writers or something, many of them have very. It seems that their creativity is from conflict.
From
conflict.
I
think many writers have, one divorce, two divorce, everything is happening in their private, and they express it in a way very creative or beautiful or interesting or something.
Yes. Well, I think that's true. Yeah. But I think most art is born of conflict.
Sorry?
I think most art is born of conflict.
Most art?
Art, yes.
Oh.
Which includes writing and painting and music, and if you look at the lives, as you look at the lives of the people involved, say like Bergman, or 5 or 6 wives and numerous mistresses, no doubt. It's not plain sailing.
No.
But nor is it. It's not a solution for everybody either, I don't think. Oh, there's your wife. Yeah. Come on in.
Come on in.
Hi, how are you? Yeah.
Ring.
Yeah, Maureen.
I think she wanted the key to our room.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, but... yeah, we are approaching an end more or less. Or what do you
Yeah,
say?
but there was something about peace we were saying. We were saying, conflict. Art being the product of conflict. Yes, I'd just like to share this with you because I think it's a good way of looking at or defining what we're about when we talk about inquiry or dialogue. Because the artist, if it's a good artist, will go through the conflict, through the work of art, and for that time, in that way, he has resolved it. If you think of something like the Steppenwolf of Hesse, I mean, he's going through tremendous conflict and working it out, but it comes to some kind of resolution. The difficulty is that resolution ends with the work. In other words, he's not himself deeply resolved. I think what we're about when we talk about transformational living or a mutation, deep mutation, and why we don't change, we're looking at something that is deep, permanent, lasting, and real. Not dependent on a work, not dependent on producing something.
Oh, right.
So that I'd just like to throw that in because I think that's what in a way makes it more difficult, because you can't just say you're working it out through your writing or you're working it out through your painting or your music or whatever. It's you are yourself the work of art. And you are yourself the one who has to find peace within. Doesn't mean you can't write or paint or something, but that's not the main point. The main point is not to have a temporary solution of conflict, but a deep, lasting, abiding, final resolution of conflict. And that's a tremendous thing.
Yeah, because I think it's not only artists. I think every human being knows a kind of relief with work with something.
Yes.
I mean, you can work. You can, if you are. There's something if you put your own trouble with yourself into words.
Right.
You know, you write down and you think about it, and as far as you can go.
Yeah.
And when you have done it, you know, it's like a little bit of a release.
Yes, of course it is.
It is, and
definitely.
that, but it's temporary.
It's temporary. That's my whole point.
Yeah,
it's temporary, and it's dependent. So it's dependent on if you're a major artist like Hesse was. If you then
who are you talking about?
Hermann Hesse.
Hesse. Hermann Hesse, right.
Hermann Hesse. He's a major artist in my view.
Yeah.
But still, it's only for the time being. He has to rework the same material in a different way in different books, and that's what he does to the end of his life, and that's what artists tend to do. They rework the same material, and in some sense that explains why, you know, there's consistent similarity between one work and another. And Kay does not accept art anyway as being anything to do with truth, which is rather Platonic in a sense.
He didn't accept that.
That art is a sort of a mirror of truth. He does accept science as being a mirror of truth to a certain degree at least, but not art. And that's
you know the other day in the morning we have this a little music from Henrik,
right.
and he plays Bach. And on one morning I said to myself, this is divine.
Yeah.
It must be, you know, because it gives you something, you know, which is not ordinary.
Not at all.
And not at all ordinary. And yes, so I also have noticed that Krishnamurti, he say no.
No, he's not interested in art in that sense.
No.
No, it's not. Because it doesn't go deep enough. I think that's the real reason, and it's not final and complete, and that's what he's looking for.
Yeah.
In those both with audiences at large and also with intimates, people he knows much better. Because being close to him was not a guarantee of having done the work, really.
No.
That still remained to be done, and still remains to be done. I think we're now at, we're at a very, 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 very critical stage in our development as a species. It's extremely grave, actually, more grave than one cares to think. And we have to pull something out of the fire. We have to, put our feet down on a different terrain. And I don't know how it's going to work. I really don't. But we have to stick together, work together, think together. There's so many things in Krishnamurti's teachings that have just been put out, but not really worked, or worked to a very limited extent. They have been somewhat, the psyche has been to some extent exposed to itself, but that is often very difficult. I mean, it's quite frightening.
Yeah.
And all these demons that are in the basement, they have to come out and be faced, and
But I think sometimes some kind of a strange thing is happening with thought or in the ego, because at one moment you maybe see that you are, kind of a disaster, or you are
a disaster. Yeah, you are a disaster. Yeah, you are.
I see.
Good job we can laugh about it. Yeah.
But in seeing that, or rather in seeing that is a kind of a shock. But then moments later, having seen, I can be kind of proud.
Proud,
it's a kind of attainment to see how disastrous I am. It's so tricky. I think
it's tricky, and one needs to be able to laugh about it also, which I think it's very important to be able to do that too, so you don't take yourself so seriously. I think it's all very tricky and unknown, really, and we just have to keep at it.
Yeah. I think we are reaching the end, because we have talked for, I don't know, maybe a little more than an hour or something.
What time is it now? It's 20 to 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's over an hour.
Oh yeah, I have two things left. The one thing I think we can maybe skip, but it was a question, when we hear about a man talking about the end of old conflict.
Yes.
Then my reaction was, how do I listen to that? Do I listen to it as a promise? K is promising something.
Yes.
or do I look at it as, most of the world say that conflict is unavoidable.
Yeah, or even desirable, that's what we said earlier.
That's what we said, even not desirable.
Yeah,
but okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but okay, Yes, that I'm a child of love, peace, and understanding.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking to the people who insist on conflict.
No, of course not.
I'm not talking
No.
to them.
No.
But to look at it as a promise or a possibility or just a fantasy.
Just a fantasy.
Yeah, and illusion.
No, I don't think it's a fantasy or an illusion because he lived it. And his life was not easy at all. And he was in a situation of potentially great conflict with Rajagopal and Rosalind, and this whole intimate life was potentially something very conflictual, which could have meant that he was no longer the world teacher. But he didn't succumb to that. He didn't allow that to contaminate him. And so he remained, I think, without conflict. I mean, he might have had conflict about choosing one pair of shoes or another, but I mean, for anything serious or inward, he was without conflict. So he had these extraordinary experiences also that are chronicled in the notebook. I mean, they're quite extraordinary, actually. And I do think he did it on humanity's behalf. There was no trace of ego. I think Leadbeater had it completely right when he saw him on the beach in 1909.
Sorry, I didn't catch you.
Leadbeater, C.W. Leadbeater,
Yeah.
he wasn't the president of the TS, but he was high up in the TS. And he was a Victorian gentleman, really. One thing about Victorian gentlemen was that they were very self-confident.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, they were very self-confident. We now are much less self-confident. We're in a much more nervous, neurotic kind of age.
Yeah.
Where certitude is sort of, not so common or reliable. But I think he did have it. I think he did have it right. That this was
so his clairvoyance, he was quite confident that it's what it is. It's true.
This is the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the guy, and I think that's a good starting point. And Kay never denied that he was the world teacher.
No.
Because that was a huge responsibility. I mean, huge. More than even he could think about, probably. Because of everything that's going on, the need for change, the radical revolution inside, which others had thought and written about. For instance, Nietzsche had thought and written about it, but they were not able to do it because they were not free of ego themselves. So it's a huge challenge, and I don't know how it unfolds, and I probably won't be here to see it for very much longer. But I can see that there's a certain number of people, and some of them are here, that really do take it to heart and work at it, and they may do it also in very quiet ways, even very lonely ways. I mean, they may not be living with others, or they may not be talking with others, or they may have occasional contact with others who have the same interests, but who's to say that they're not working at it? It's a very free and open field, I think.
Yeah. Yes, because I think if personally, I would also, for me, Kay is, I think it's okay to say he's the world teacher.
Yeah.
But in a way, it has to be proven. I mean, the world teachers, if we talk about Jesus or Buddha or something, they have a significance for humanity for a long time.
Oh yeah.
So and that we haven't seen with Kay, of course.
Well, don't forget that we're right at the beginning. He's not been dead 40 years yet. Initially, if you read between the lines, the epistles of St. Paul to the Corinthians, the Galatians, St. Paul went around from one little community to another, talking to them and expounding the teachings of Jesus and obviously interpreting them to a considerable extent, but still, it was very small at first. If you look at that in the context of the Roman Empire, which was all powerful at the time. They destroyed Jerusalem after. They were all powerful, and this was probably just some small thing going on. And they got rid of the main guy, whom they regarded as a criminal anyway. So it was not no big deal. But it did grow and it did persist, and I think that's and the Desert Fathers and monasteries and whatnot kept it alive. So that essentially, I see that's the task now. Also, is to keep it alive.
Yeah.
It won't. People have to. Yeah, support it, meet, converse, inquire, be fond of each other, love each other. Yeah, that's all. It's all extreme. Some of the things. Krishnamurti is a very radical teacher. That's true, and he starts from nowhere in the sense that he doesn't build his teaching on anything that's existed before. But neither did the Buddha, neither did Jesus. They were completely original also. So I see it in that way, that one has to just persist in this and see what happens.
Yeah.
Opportunities will arise, I think. And it took several centuries for Buddhism to spread, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a matter of hundreds of years. Now it looks as though it's a worldwide, but it has its roots in various orders of monks, and it won't. I don't feel it's going to happen next week or next year or next century even. There's something has to. This seed that Kay talked about, the seed of a million years, that has to grow somehow. And it can only grow in and by human beings, and therefore we have to, stay with it.
Yeah. Also, a thing about that is sometimes I think that the result is not the only thing. The result, the result. The result,
the outcome,
The outcome,
yeah.
It's not the only thing.
No, not at all.
It's
no.
Yeah.
No. Well,
and regarding when we have talked or we have mentioned brotherhood and love.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's a kind of a positive.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just immediately thinking, that for me I think it's still it is important to see hate coming in.
Hate
in myself.
Yes, of course.
To acknowledge hate. Sometimes hate is coming, and to kind of look into where does it come from, or what is why
what's it doing there?
Yeah, what is it doing there?
Yeah. These are all things we have to. And there's no simple solution either. The world we live in now is so much more opened up than the world that Jesus lived in or the world that the Buddha lived in. They were almost provincial by comparison. Now we've got, space and quantum theory, and I mean these are immense breakthroughs actually in our understanding of how nature works. And it demands a different kind of response, I feel. But I think we're right at the beginning of something, really.
Yeah.
And it's right at the beginning.
I would like to, for my part, end with I just before we met, I wrote in the back of it's a Krishnamurti book called what is called something on peace.
Yes, where can peace be found?
Where can peace be found there?
Yeah.
And I think on the back page it was something like, in the perception of what is true, there is peace.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't make that connection.
No.
But yes, quite right. Because it's not as if he's saying truth is peace, peace is truth. It's not as crude as that. But the perception of truth is peace or contains peace. Yeah. Yeah, that's very cryptic actually. Because it seems at the same time to contain peace, balance, harmony, love,
And change.
and
change.
and change. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Ah.
yeah. Subtle change, but change. Yeah. So it's a moving thing. You see what I mean? I mean, I can see that in myself. I've been thinking of peace as a rather static state.
Oh, yeah.
Rather static, no unruffled, leave me alone kind of thing. But it's not that.
No.
It's not that. So one thing we have to do is clear up our misconceptions, of which there are plenty.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Shall we leave it? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Let's
Thank you.
leave it there.
Yeah, let's leave
Okay.
it there. We've had, an hour and a half or so.
Yeah,
That's good.
that's very
Yeah.
good.
There's plenty to say when you get into it.
That is, yeah.
Mm.